Welcome to NTD Evening News. Our top story tonight, how the federal crackdown on crime in D.C. is unfolding after President Trump declares a citywide emergency and puts the D.C. police force under federal control. Mario Atsu is at the White House with more on that, plus new inflation numbers and a $1 billion UCLA settlement proposal. The Trump administration hashing out plans for the Trump-Putin meeting on Friday, and the State Department releases its annual human rights report. Jack Bradley has those updates. Russia is demanding that Ukraine withdraw from its own Donetsk region before the Friday meeting with President Trump. Arian Pozdar has Russia's conditions and how Ukraine responds. Israeli forces say they are now operating in the strongholds of the Hamas terrorist group. Meanwhile, Israel's prime minister tells the people of Iran to fight for their freedom. Jason Parry reports. New research shows wildfire deaths in Los Angeles may be much higher than reported. Researchers say smoke from fires is causing far more health problems than the flames themselves.
This is NTD Evening News, live from our global headquarters in New York City. Here's Tiffany Meyer.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight. A day after President Trump declared a citywide emergency and took sweeping action to crack down on crime in the nation's capital, arrests are rolling in. Plus, new inflation numbers, and the White House is seeking a $1 billion settlement from UCLA over alleged anti-Semitism. NTD's Mario Otsu has more from the White House.
Last night, approximately 850 officers and agents were surged across the city. They made a total of 23 arrests, including multiple other contacts.
Press Secretary Leavitt told us the 23 arrests included homicide, possession of dangerous drugs with intent to distribute them, and driving under the influence. In addition, 6 illegal handguns were seized last night, and Secretary Leavitt said this is just the beginning.
We also want to make D.C. safe and beautiful, and that involves removing mentally disturbed individuals and homeless encampments as well.
The press secretary said D.C. homeless can be taken to a shelter and offered addiction or mental health services. If they refuse, they will be fined or face time in jail. Leavitt reminds us these are not new laws, but
they have not been enforced, which is part of the reason for this federalizing of the National Guard. So we will be using these regulations and code that already exists to clean up our streets. And the United States Park Police has actually done remarkable work in terms of removing homeless encampments from the city. Since the president signed this executive order in March, 70 homeless encampments have been removed by the U.S. Park Police.
In economic news, the White House says the America First agenda is working. The latest CPI report released today shows that inflation remains stable.
In January, when this president showed up to the White House, the 6-month annualized core inflation rate was 3.7%. Today, 6 months later, the 6-month annualized core inflation rate is 2.4%. So we are trending in the right direction. Small business optimism has reached a 5-month high.
While critics of President Trump's tariff strategy have warned that tariffs will sharply drive up prices, the president this morning said tariffs have not caused inflation or any other problems for America other than massive amounts of cash pouring into our Treasury's coffers. President Trump also criticized Goldman Sachs CEO David Solomon over a report claiming that Americans absorb the cost of tariffs. Meanwhile, the White House doubles down on its efforts to counter anti-Semitism. President Trump's administration is seeking $1 billion from UCLA over campus anti-Semitism claims. The governor of California, Gavin Newsom, called the $1 billion UCLA fine extortion, threatening that California will sue.
Bring it on, Gavin. This administration is well within its legal right to do this, and we want to ensure that our colleges and our universities are respecting the First Amendment rights and the religious liberties of students on their campuses, and UCLA has failed to do that.
This comes after Columbia University agreed to pay more than $220 million in fines and Brown $50 million for failing to curb anti-Semitism. And Harvard is reportedly nearing a $500 million settlement with President Trump. Reporting from the White House, Mario Otsu, NTD News.
After President Trump took control of D.C.'s police department, he vowed to address crime policies nationwide. The president is urging Congress to pass legislation to outlaw cashless bail. NTD's Melina Weisskopf has more about this push.
President Trump is directing lawmakers in Congress to write up and pass a bill that would override local laws that let defendants get released from jail before their trial without having to pay any money. This type of policy is usually referred to as no cash bail or cashless bail. These policies can be found in cities like Chicago and New York. There are other areas also moving to enact cashless bail. Now, President Trump said every place in the country where you have no cash bail is a disaster, he says, leading Congresswoman Stefanik from New York to quickly announce that she wants to be the one to write up and lead this bill through Congress. Here's Stefanik.
President Trump is exactly correct that we need to address the crime crisis and the leadership that he's bringing to D.C. I'm looking forward to introducing legislation to end failed bail reform so that we can save New York.
New York's current governor, Kathy Hochul, pushed back on this, saying that they've made changes to the 2019 law, which gives judges more discretion on whether to even give the option for suspects to be released. Now, other city leaders are echoing the New York governor's point, saying that their approach to crime reduction is working, so federal action isn't needed. Here's Baltimore City Mayor.
The reality is no mayor is out here saying that we don't have to deal with crime. We have the fewest amount of homicides through this date on record. That's 50 years, a 50-year low.
Now that we see Democrat leaders across the nation pushing back on this proposed legislation even before it's been written or introduced in Congress, the question is how many Democrats would support the GOP's no cash bail bill once it does come to the floor. President Trump said he's relying on Republican votes, but the Senate would need some Democrats since most legislation usually needs 60 votes to get it through the chamber unless Republicans squeeze this policy into a second reconciliation bill that could pass with a simple majority. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Melina Weiskup, NTD News.
As President Trump announces measures to combat crime in D.C., he's also issuing a warning to cities like Chicago, New York, Los Angeles, and Baltimore. Would everyday Americans support the president's efforts if he decides to expand the policy? NTD's Sam Wong was out on the National Mall in D.C. to hear from the people.
President Trump just announced that he's federalizing D.C. law enforcement due to the ongoing crime issues here in the city. He also sounded the alarm for some other U.S. cities like Oakland, Baltimore, and stuff like that. So would you be in favor of him potentially expanding that policy to somewhere else?
Absolutely. Safety first. I mean, why not? I mean, if it's going to bring crime down in any state, I mean, I'm all for it.
No, I'm not for him federalizing the police forces across the whole country. You know, he's already started with D.C. and I don't know what's next. I don't know.
I think if the cities aren't taking care of it, somebody else has to. If it's the federal government, then I'm for it.
Hypothetically, I'd support it depending on where, like, how much damage is being done and how much crime is going down.
A federal takeover is like draconian, I think. So I would rather have make sure that the people are getting what they want versus, you know, federal government just jumps in and overreaches and does too much.
You look back at the BLM riots that we had before, should have stepped in during that time, right? We saw cities burning, right? We saw violence, we saw people killed, right? And so I think the government should help out in those cases. So I applaud his efforts doing that.
What are your thoughts on ending no cash bail? Because we've seen this in D.C., we've seen this happening in New York City as well. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
I think that people who commit crimes should be held accountable to the law. Judicial systems changed in the last 5 or 10 years. All of a sudden, you know, certain crimes seem to be acceptable. And in my time, when you make them acceptable, then you're going to get more of them, right?
Yeah, I mean, not everybody has that money to put up and cover their bail. So why not give them a chance?
Well, I heard the whole thing like in San Francisco when they said, you know, if it's under $900, we're not going to, you know, prosecute things. And what happened? You had, you know, huge groups going in there just looting stores. So you have to have a balance of law and order. How do you do that? And the cash bill question, I don't really know that I have the answer for that.
Stopping it, I think it should be stopped. I think it's stupid that if you commit a crime that you don't have to pay for it.
If you get bailed out too easily, then there's no deterrent involved there. So whatever it takes to make people pay the price for what they've done.
I think if you're committing crimes, you have to pay for your crimes. And if we shouldn't just throw people back into society if they're clearly screwing things up over and over again.
And as the White House says homeless individuals could face jail if they don't accept help, is this a step toward rehabilitation or a step too far? Jason Palmer and Ryan Stuenbach join us for a panel discussion tonight. Tune into NTD's Capitol Report at 7 p.m. Eastern. The White House is gearing up for President Trump's face-to-face meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin on Friday. This while the State Department releases its annual human rights report. NTD's Washington correspondent Jack Bradley has the details.
This is a listening exercise for the president. Look,
the White House is characterizing the meeting on Friday between Russian President Vladimir Putin and President Trump as a listening exercise on the part of Trump rather than a negotiation.
This is for the president to go and to get, again, a more firm and better understanding of how we can hopefully bring this war to an end.
And that's what has to happen, as Ukrainian President Zelenskyy won't be there, but still must agree to anything for a deal to be made. Trump said Monday that he'll know whether a deal can be made to end this 3.5-year war after meeting with Putin.
Probably in the first 2 minutes, I'll know exactly whether or not a deal can be made.
How will you know that?
Because that's what I do. I make deals.
Trump added that he'll call Zelenskyy immediately after the summit and also call some European allies in NATO. And as for what to expect, Trump says that he'll discuss territory changes with Putin, meaning that Ukraine may need to give up some of its land that is occupied by Russian forces in order to end this war. Now, Zelenskyy has stated his unwillingness to cede any land to Russia and that he wants any peace deal to guarantee Ukraine's security from any future Russian attacks. Now, Russia has annexed Crimea and has troops in control of the areas in the Donbass region. Now, Moscow has presented ceasefire conditions demanding Ukraine withdraw its troops and cede much of that territory, and also wants Ukraine to renounce its bid to join NATO. Meanwhile, the State Department released its 2024 Human Rights Report on Tuesday, scaling back much of its previous year's report and saying that the previous years included a long list of, quote, politically biased demands. As for the report's length, the administration holds that actions speak louder than words.
We will have perhaps some in this case, smaller reports, but I would suggest that you watch the actions that are taken by an administration and that commitment to human rights.
Now, this report is congressionally required and offers accounts of all nations' human rights records. On China, which members of the administration and previous administrations have called the top adversary of the U.S., it details accounts of detaining political and religious prisoners all the way to transnational repression, in which the Chinese Communist Party violently represses dissent on U.S. soil and around the globe. Reporting by Jack Bradley, NTD News.
Russia is reportedly demanding that Ukraine withdraw from its own Donetsk region before Friday as a condition for a possible ceasefire. Meanwhile, European allies are planning a call with President Trump before his Friday meeting with Russia's Vladimir Putin. NTD's international correspondent Arian Pozdar has more.
The EU is extremely active on all fronts to support Ukraine and put Ukraine in a position of strength.
European leaders are set to hold a call with President Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy on Wednesday. The European allies are expressing support for Ukraine ahead of Trump's meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Alaska on Friday. European leaders say Ukraine shouldn't lose any land as part of a possible peace deal with Russia. They also say that Ukraine has to be involved in the peace process so that it can decide its own future. Zelenskyy agrees, making the same point on Tuesday.
It's impossible to talk about Ukraine without Ukraine, and no one will accept that. They can't agree on anything about Ukraine without us.
He added that Moscow wants Kiev to completely withdraw from Ukraine's Donetsk region before the Friday meeting. Zelenskyy says the withdrawal is a Russian condition for a possible ceasefire. Kiev opposes the idea and says its forces won't withdraw from the Ukrainian region. And the Russian Defense Ministry published this video showing recruits signing military contracts. This comes just one day after Zelenskyy said Russia is preparing for more attacks on Ukraine, despite peace efforts by the US. Meanwhile, Zelenskyy says he's trying to make it easier for draft-eligible men to travel outside Ukraine.
Currently, there is an age cap of 18 at the border, and I propose raising it to 22, so that there are no restrictions on crossing.
Ukraine first imposed travel restrictions on men of conscription age after the Russian invasion. Meanwhile, in Alaska, residents in Anchorage are preparing for the upcoming summit.
Well, I think it's really a fascinating opportunity for Alaska to shine in what we can do for those kind of venues. I think it's a safe venue for both the leaders to come here.
The state has historic ties to both nations. The United States purchased Alaska from Russia in 1867. Arian Pastar, NTD News.
Israeli forces say they are now operating in the strongholds of the Hamas terrorist group in the Gaza Strip. And in another development, Israel's prime minister calls on the people of Iran to fight for their freedom. NTD's Jason Perry has the update.
Israeli forces released footage on Tuesday of armed Hamas terrorists surrounding an SUV in the Gaza Strip before driving off. But on closer inspection, the logo for the World Central Kitchen is visible on top of the vehicle. Israel said they confirmed with the organization that the vehicle had nothing to do with the World Central Kitchen's operations. Israel said that Hamas terrorists were using the Humanitarian logo and wearing yellow vests so they would not be targeted. The Israeli Air Force later struck armed terrorists around the vehicle in Deir al-Bala in the central Gaza Strip. Israel coordinated humanitarian airdrops in the same city as well, highlighting the complexity of the war. A local resident shared his experience.
What brought me here is the lack of food at home, lack of water at home. This is what makes me come here, get injured, fight with each other, and they hit us and beat us, so that in the end we get a kilo of sugar or flour or cooking oil.
Meanwhile, Israeli forces say they are now operating in Hamas strongholds while continuing plans to take over the entire Gaza Strip. They reported killing dozens of terrorists, as well as striking underground tunnels, observation posts, launch positions, and other structures that posed a threat to Israeli troops. Residents in Gaza City, one of the remaining Hamas strongholds, were seen responding to the scene of a reported Israeli airstrike. In another development, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu addressed the people of Iran about a potential upcoming water crisis in Iran. And he blamed the Iranian regime for the hardships Iranians face.
The tyrants of Tehran preferred sending hundreds of billions of dollars, not to you, to Hamas, to Hezbollah, to the Houthis, instead of funding your hospitals, your schools, and your roads. It doesn't have to be this way.
And he gave a call for action to the Iranian people.
Take to the streets, demand justice, demand accountability, protest tyranny. Build a better future for your families and for all Iranians. Now is the time for action. Now is the time to fight for freedom.
Netanyahu said that Israel is the #1 water recycler in the world, and that as soon as Iran is free, Israeli water experts will go to Iran to help provide sustainable, clean water to residents. Jason Perry, NTD News.
A new study suggests that this year's Los Angeles wildfires killed far more people than official counts show. Researchers now believe the true death toll could be more than 14 times higher than reported. NTD's Christina Corona tells us more.
While 30 direct fatalities were recorded from California's Palisades and Eaton fires in January, researchers estimate the real toll may be closer to 440 deaths. Even though around 30 deaths were officially recorded, the smoke's impact on health may have caused many more fatalities. The findings, published in the Journal of the American Medical Association, come from mortality data comparing expected deaths in early 2025 to previous years. From January 5th to February 1st, Los Angeles County recorded 6,371 deaths, about 440 more than usual. Experts say many of these deaths were likely linked to toxic smoke that blanketed the region, worsening conditions like heart disease, asthma, and chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. This study highlights how wildfire smoke can cause serious, long-lasting harm, sometimes more than the fire itself. Wildfire smoke is made up of gases, water vapor, and tiny particles like tar, carbon, and soot, along with hundreds of harmful chemicals. The smallest particles pose the greatest risk because they can enter the bloodstream, causing health problems that can persist long after the fire has been extinguished. Researchers warn the true toll may be higher as smoke and toxicants crossed the county lines and lingered for weeks. The findings come as wildfire smoke from Canada and California's Gifford fire triggers air quality alerts in 11 states this week. Scientists say the study shows smoke, not the flames, is often the deadliest part of a wildfire. Christina Corona, NTD News.
Coming up, what investigators have uncovered about the shooter who fired 180 shots near the CDC headquarters in Georgia, killing a police officer, a possible motive, and how the now deceased gunman obtained his firearms. The Justice Department announces it's indicted a Haitian gang leader along with an American co-conspirator. That's for allegedly evading sanctions to raise funds for gang activities in Haiti. Jason Blair has the details. And Democratic infighting looms ahead of the 2026 midterms. Two lawmakers are set on competing against each other in a new district in the proposed Texas congressional map. Luis Eduardo Martinez has more when we come back. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. An update on the shooting near the CDC headquarters last Friday. A man fired 180 shots into the campus and broke about 150 windows. He killed a police officer in the attack. Officials said the shooter had documents in his home outlining his opposition to the COVID-19 vaccines. The documents are still being examined by law enforcement, including the FBI. Here's Chris Hosey, the director of Georgia Bureau of Investigation, at a press conference this morning.
A search warrant executed at the residence of the shooter revealed written documentation that expressed the shooter's discontent with the COVID-19 vaccinations. Evidence in this investigation indicates that the shooter had recently verbalized thoughts of suicide, which even led to law enforcement being contacted several weeks prior to the incident. The shooter died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Further forensic testing of the firearms evidence will be conducted by the GBI crime lab.
Officer David Rose was shot and killed near the CDC Atlanta campus last Friday. Rose was shot while responding to the incident and was taken to a nearby hospital where he died of his injuries. According to the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, the suspect has been identified as 30-year-old Patrick Joseph White of Kennesaw. He was found dead with gunshot wounds. Hosey says today that he believes the shooter used a mixture of guns, including rifles, a shotgun, and maybe a handgun. He added that the shooter stole the weapons from his father's safe. Hosey said over 500 shell casings have been recovered from the crime scene area. A total of 5 firearms were recovered from the scene. Some 200 rounds impacted 6 of the CDC's buildings. The Justice Department says it has indicted a Haitian gang leader for conspiracy to violate U.S. sanctions. The DOJ says it also indicted a co-conspirator for financially supporting gang activities. NTD correspondent Jason Blair reports.
Violent actors like Shazir and the rest of his criminal associates must understand there is no safe haven for them and the people like them that traffic violence in our communities.
The Justice Department on Tuesday announced the indictment of Jimmy Sherazir, also known as Barbecue. The U.S. has sanctioned him since 2020 under the Global Magnitsky Human Rights Accountability Act.
He both planned and participated in the killing of approximately 71 Haitians.
U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, Janine Pirro, says that Sherazir's co-defendant, Brazier Richardson, was also indicted for sending money to Sherazir.
Sending money from the Haitian diaspora in the United States to Cherezier.
Pirro also has a warning for others who sent Sherazir money to support his, quote, violent acts in his home country.
They will be prosecuted, and we will fine them because they are supporting an individual who is committing human rights abuses, and we will not look the other way.
Pirro says that a lot of violence has been happening in Haiti. She referred to a recent kidnapping of 16 American missionaries in the country.
There is incredible violence going on there, which is why the State Department has gotten involved and why we have made the decision to make it very clear under the Magnitsky Act that we're coming after you if you give money to Cherezier.
Authorities also announced a $5 million reward for information leading to the arrest and or conviction of Sherazir and key members of his gang.
We know someone has information that can help end this violence, and we want them to come forward and know that they are safe in doing so.
Reporting in Washington, D.C., Jason Blair, NTD News.
The Texas Senate today passed a GOP-backed redistricting bill, voting 19-2 to approve new congressional maps that could give Republicans up to 5 more U.S. House seats. During the vote, 9 Democrats walked out in protest, but 2 remained on the floor, allowing the vote to pass. Still, without a quorum in the Texas House, where Democrats remain out of state, the maps can't advance to the governor's desk. Meanwhile, 2 U.S. congressmen representing Texas have signaled they're willing to compete against each other in the newly proposed Texas congressional map. Our Washington correspondent Luis Eduardo Martinez has more on the story.
The newly proposed Texas congressional map places 78-year-old Congressman Lloyd Doggett, who has served the 37th district since 1994, in the same Austin area district as 36-year-old Congressman Greg Casar, chairman of the House Progressive Caucus. In a campaign email, Congressman Doggett suggested that Greg Casar has the potential to use his organizing skills and populist message to win over the disaffected, particularly disaffected Hispanic voters of the newly created 35th district. The problem for Casar is that the newly drawn 35th district now covers areas that President Trump won in 2024 by over 10 points. Casar posted on social media this Tuesday, "I love you, Austin, Texas," suggesting that he will compete with Doggett for the same seat in Congress. Meanwhile, Democratic state legislators remain absconded in Illinois for a second consecutive week, impeding the state legislature from sessioning.
That it wasn't flood relief that they brought to the floor quickly. It was absolutely focused on bringing together a bill that would decimate people's voices, black and brown voices.
The newly proposed congressional map in Texas actually creates not 1, but 2 majority black districts for the first time in the history of Texas, and an additional majority Hispanic district.
Members, the roll has been called, and again, a quorum is not present. What this means, first, we cannot take up the critical flood response legislation scheduled for our floor today.
The special session of the Texas state legislature ends this Friday, and Governor Greg Abbott has promised to call an additional special session starting on the same day.
If they think all they have to do is wait it out until November, December, they're wrong. I'm going to do this for the next 2 years, and they're going to have to basically take up residency in Illinois. They may as well start voting in Illinois.
California Governor Gavin Newsom has threatened to hold a special election to override the California Districting Commission and redraw the congressional map in retaliation. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
The Department of Government Efficiency, also called DOGE, regains access to government data. A U.S. appeals court today rejected efforts by a group of unions to block them from accessing data at 3 federal agencies. A lower court in Maryland had granted the union's request for a temporary pause on DOGE's access to documents at the Departments of Education and Treasury and the Office of Personnel Management. DOGE can now access data such as Social Security numbers and citizenship status for as long as the lawsuit continues to move forward. The majority said the unions likely didn't have legal standing to sue. The one dissenting judge said the majority standard was too high. The agencies involved in the case and the groups that sued have not yet commented on the decision. Coming up, world leaders will be watching Friday's Alaska summit closely to see where the Russia-Ukraine conflict could be headed next. What can we expect from this highly anticipated meeting? Foreign affairs analyst and attorney Gerard Filitti joins us to discuss. And with just hours to spare, President Trump grants China a 90-day extension on higher tariffs as trade talks continue. Dana Monahan with more on that after the break. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. President Trump will meet with Russian leader Vladimir Putin this Friday in Alaska. The 2 leaders are set to hold talks on ending the more than 3-year war in Ukraine. The president said yesterday that both Kyiv and Moscow would have to give up land for the war to end, calling Friday's face-to-face with Putin a, quote, feel-out meeting. Today, European Union leaders appealed to Trump to defend Europe's vital security interests during the summit. Joining us now to discuss is foreign affairs analyst Gerard Filitti. He's also an attorney specializing in international law. Gerard, thank you so much for joining us. Great to have you again. Now, today, reports say Russia's troops have advanced deeper into Ukraine. Could what's happening on the ground, especially over the next few days, impact these negotiations?
That's precisely why Russia is trying to make these advances now in the Donetsk region, and we have seen some limited achievements by Russian forces, but very small numbers of troops, numbering perhaps no more than 10 at a time, making it between Ukrainian positions. So while this is technically a Russian advance, it's not something that is of significant strategic importance right now. But it is nevertheless an attempt by Russia to influence the negotiations and the discussions that will take place on Friday, making it look like their advance and their victory is inevitable in order to better position themselves.
Now, Zelenskyy vowed today not to give eastern Ukrainian land to Russia, saying that abandoning the Donbas region would open the door for Putin to, quote, start a third war. Now, when Trump says both sides have to give up land, where could we see those concessions? Is there anything either side would be willing to swap?
It's very hard to see what those concessions might be. We have to also remember that 10 years ago, Russia took control of Crimea, which was Ukrainian, and other parts of Ukraine as well, and that Russia does have ambitions far beyond the Donbas region. In terms of what land Ukraine might get out of this, it's potentially you might see a Russian withdrawal from some parts that are not in the Donbas region, where they might have a slight military advantage. But overall, it does not nearly compensate for the land that Russia expects to gain in this deal.
Now, EU leaders also weighed in. They said in a statement, quote, the people of Ukraine must have the freedom to decide their future. What can we draw from Ukraine not being present at this upcoming meeting?
It's very difficult to see that a ceasefire or an actual deal would emerge with Ukraine not present, without their interests being represented by Ukrainians' own representatives. So this really is, or it seems to be, what President Trump is calling it, which is a listening session. It's an opportunity to listen to what Russia has to say and how to frame the discussion on what might bring about a ceasefire or a peace deal further down the line. I think the absence of Ukraine or European players really is a understanding here between Putin and Trump that they need to come to some kind of understanding of how far America would go to support Ukraine and what the limits of a possible deal might be. So this really is sounding out Russia more than actually reaching a meaningful deal.
Now, zooming out a bit here, China is watching this meeting closely, given the no limits partnership between Russia and China. What would an end to the Russia-Ukraine war mean to China?
An end to the Russia-Ukraine war would be of a good benefit to China, first because it would have an inevitable reward for its assistance to Russia, but also because this frees its ability to provide resources to its own needs. It can, for example, reinvest that money and those weapons that it's giving Russia right now into domestic production for the Chinese Communist forces. This might be seen as something of an eventual threat to Taiwan or to other countries in the Pacific theater as China shifts its focus from Russia-Ukraine more to its own ambitions, which is that of a global hegemon.
And looking ahead, Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said today that the door is open for President Trump to visit Putin in Russia in the future. What would Trump visiting Russia signal to the international community?
What that would signal is a break from the way Joe Biden conducted foreign affairs, which was basically to marginalize Russia and put it out on the sanctions list to put pressure on it globally, call it a pariah state essentially, in order to put maximum pressure on it to pull out of Ukraine and to end that conflict. This would signal some sort of a normalization of ties between the United States and Russia. But at the same time, we have to remember that the U.S. and Russia have more to do on the business stage, on the global stage, including business transactions, including negotiating how to use the Arctic resources that are available and willing to be exploited, including how to deal with other spheres of influence, including China for that matter, than just the Ukraine conflict. So the deepening of relations between President Trump and President Putin signals that America and Russia very much appreciate that global stakes are more than just Ukraine.
Lots to watch for sure. Gerard Filitti, as always, thank you so much for joining us.
Pleasure. Thank you.
China signals interest in talks between Trump and Putin this Friday. Speaking with Brazil's Lula da Silva, Chinese leader Xi Jinping called for unity to resist the U.S. In a phone call, Xi emphasized the strong ties between Beijing and Brazil, calling for joint efforts to achieve a political resolution to the war. China is a key supporter of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Xi also underscored a united front against what he called bullying behavior, a reference to U.S. tariffs. And that conversation came as President Trump extended the tariff truce with China by 90 days, with only hours to spare before the deadline. NTD's Dana Monahan has more on the executive order Trump signed to allow trade talks to move forward.
Trump wrote that all other elements of the agreement will remain the same. Both sides had floated the idea of extending the deal to allow for further talks since a two-day meeting in Stockholm in late July. The United States and China engaged in near-embargo tariffs earlier this year. The U.S. imposed 145% levies on Chinese goods entering the country, while Beijing countered with 125% retaliatory tariffs. Since then, the U.S. has lowered its rate to 30%, while China has reduced it to 10%.
In other Trump administration news, the president said he held a very interesting meeting with Intel CEO Leavitt yesterday.
The sit-down took place just days after he called for Tan's resignation over his alleged ties to Chinese companies with military backgrounds. Trump wrote on Truth Social that he met with Tan along with Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick and Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. Trump described Tan's success as an amazing story and said Tan will work with cabinet members to come up with suggestions for the president during the next week. Tan took the reins of Intel in March as the embattled chipmaker tries to regain territory from its competitors. Trump on August 7th called for Tan's immediate resignation. This after Senate Intelligence Committee Chairman Tom Cotton raised concerns over Tan's history of investing in Chinese companies, including those with alleged ties to the People's Liberation Army. In response, Tan said he fully shares the president's commitment to advancing U.S. national and economic security.
The executive says there's been a lot of misinformation about his past roles and that Intel is engaging with the administration to make sure they have the facts. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
Coming up, is President Trump's vision of a UFC event at the White House now a reality? Dave Martin joins us with the latest when we come back. Now for your sports news, we're joined by NTD's Dave Martin. Dave, plenty going on right now, but let's start in the UFC as CEO Dana White confirmed he is talking with President Trump about a UFC event at the White House. What do we know about this?
Yeah, more than we did yesterday, actually. Yesterday the UFC's deal with Paramount was announced. And we talked about how Trump had mentioned wanting to have a UFC event at the White House next summer as part of America's 250th birthday celebration. Now, just hours after the Paramount deal was announced, Dana White, CEO of UFC, told the Associated Press that this fight night event at the White House lawn is absolutely going to happen. He said it'll be on the 4th of July next summer, live on CBS, which is owned by Paramount, and then he'll be heading to the White House. He's heading to the White House later this month to discuss the details with Trump. Now, this whole thing kind of actually shows really how the UFC has really grown in popularity. This is a company that was bought back in 2001 for just $2 million. By 2016, they were sold for $4 billion. Now the company that owns them, this is the TKO Group, has a media deal worth over $1 billion a year. And now they are staging an event on the White House lawn, Tiff. So only in America can this happen, right?
It would be a big birthday celebration for America, that's for sure, 250 years.
Yeah, 20,000 people in the White House. Did I mention that? The lawn? I didn't know it was big enough for that, but I guess we'll see.
It'd be a very watched event, let's put it that way.
We hope to be there, too.
Speaking of watched events, shifting gears to the WNBA All-Star guard Caitlin Clark has been sidelined for nearly a month now with an injured groin. Has the team updated her status?
Yeah, Indiana Fever head coach Stephanie White said yesterday that Clark is progressing, but not yet to the point of practicing with the team. Now, the progress that she's made, she's been able to run full court. They're building up Clark's endurance, though, but she's not still practicing with the team yet. Still no timetable on her return. It was actually 4 weeks ago today that Clark was injured in their win against the Connecticut Sun. That was actually third different leg injury this season. She would end up missing that weekend's All-Star event, and she has not been back. She's now missed 19 out of the team's 32 games this year. There's only 12 games left in this season. Their final regular season game is on September 9th. But despite that, Indiana Fever is still doing well. They've got an 18-14 record. Tonight, they play the Dallas Wings, who are just 8-24, their last place in the WNBA.
While moving to soccer news, Cristiano Ronaldo's girlfriend announced their engagement on social media yesterday.
Yes, Georgiano Rodriguez posted a picture, a massive ring on her hand with a translated caption, Yes, I do, in this and in all my lives. Now, the couple has actually been dating for 9 years. They share a total of 5 kids together. They apparently met at a Gucci store where she was a sales assistant back in 2016. She is also a model. Now, no confirmation yet from Ronaldo himself, probably busy playing soccer. The former Real Madrid and Manchester United star now plays for Al Nassr in Saudi Arabia. Now, Tiff, unfortunately, I could not show the ring. It would probably be more accurately described as a rock, I would say. I mean, it was like bigger than her finger. I mean, it was huge. So I don't know how much set him back, but the guy makes, a couple $100 million a year, drives some incredibly expensive cars. So I'm sure he could afford whatever it was. Who knows? Maybe he got, free ring with every 5th Lamborghini purchase or something like that. But quite the ring there, the rock.
I mean, the internet has been reacting to the size. Looking at tonight's baseball schedule, though, all 30 teams are in action. What games stand out to you?
Yeah, for one, Milwaukee on a 10-game winning streak. They have the best record in baseball, but tonight they go probably against the best pitcher in baseball. That is Pittsburgh's Paul Skenes. Now, Skenes actually has a losing record this year, 7-8. That's more a function of the team's lack of run support for him. He leads the league in ERA as well as fewest runs allowed as well as fewest hits allowed in the majors. Meanwhile, the Brewers will counter with Freddie Peralta on the mound. He leads the majors with 13 wins. They play tonight in Milwaukee starting at 7:40 Eastern Time. Also tonight, the New York Mets try to snap their 7-game losing streak. They host the Atlanta Braves at 7:10 Eastern Time. And the Mets were in just first place just 9 days ago. They've lost 7 straight games. They are 5.5 games down behind the Philadelphia Phillies. So tough spot right now for Mets fans. Actually, the New York Yankees are not doing that hot either. It's a tough time for New York baseball fans. Even tougher for Kansas City baseball fans. But New York fans probably even worse because they're very fanatical about baseball. So tough time for them.
All right. Well, on that note, Dave, as always, thanks for joining us.
Oh, you are welcome, Tiff.
And that's all for today's news. For on-the-clock coverage, visit us at ntd.com/live or download our NTD app. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Good night.